creating a crisis. Certain questions raised during the 1973 oil embargo seem to point to the fact that the crisis was created by the Illuminati, as a test, to see what it would be like without gasoline for automobiles, and fuel for heating homes. During the embargo, Maine's governor, Democrat Kenneth M. accused the Nixon administration of creating a managed oil shortage to force support of its energy programs. A 1973 study by Philadelphia Inquirer reporters Donald Bartlett and James B. Steele revealed that while American oil companies were telling the U.S. to curtail oil consumption through a massive advertising campaign, the 5 largest oil companies, Exxon, Mobil, Texaco, Gulf, and Standard Oil of California, were selling close to 2 barrels overseas, for every barrel, 42 gallons, of oil sold here. They accused the oil companies and the federal government of creating the crisis. In 1974, Lloyd's of London, the leading maritime insurance company in the world, said that during the 3 months before the embargo, 474 tankers left the Middle East, with oil for the world. During the 3 months at the height of the crisis, 492 tankers left those same ports. During the embargo, Atlantic Richfield, ARCO, whose president, Thornton Bradshaw, was a member of the CFR, drivers were hauling excess fuel to storage facilities in the Mojave Desert. All of this evidence points to the conclusion that there was no oil shortage in 1973. Anthony C. Sutton wrote in Energy, The Created Crisis, our mythical energy shortage can be dismissed with a few statistics. The U.S. consumes about 71 quads. A quad is 1 quadrillion BTUs, or 10 to the 15th power British thermal units, of energy per year. There is available now in the U.S., excluding solar sources and without oil and gas imports, about 151,000 quads. Consequently, we have sufficient energy resources to keep us functioning at our present rate of consumption for about 2,000 to 3,000 years without discovering new reserves. Even at higher consumption rates, there will be no problem in the next millennium. In 1977, independent petroleum companies discovered 88% of the new oil fields, drilling on 81% of those. They have been hampered by the large corporations, referred to earlier as the Seven Sisters, who wanted to avoid adding to our national supply so they can profit from the higher prices. Carter's Department of Energy was established to perpetuate the propaganda of the existence of an energy crisis. In 1975, an anonymous ARCO official told Hugh M. Chance, a former state senator from Colorado, that the government had allowed only one pool of oil in a 100 square miles area on Alaska's North Slope to be developed, even though the entire area north of Brooks Range has so much oil that if it were drilled, in 5 years the United States could be totally energy-free and totally independent from the rest of the world as far as energy is concerned. The Prudhoe Bay oil field is one of the richest oil fields on Earth, able to produce an oil flow for at least 20 years, without the need of a pump, and a natural gas supply which could supply the entire country for 200 years. However, the government wouldn't allow it to be pumped out, and it is funneled back into the ground. The Gull Island find had a different chemical structure, as did the Kupiruk oil field, west of there, which meant that the 3 different chemical compositions indicated the existence of separate pools of oil on the North Slope in an area of 50,000 square miles. Needless to say, this seems to be an almost unlimited supply of domestic oil. Another ARCO official told Lindsey Williams, a chaplain for the work camps on the Trans-Alaska Oil Pipeline, that there will never be an energy crisis, because we have as much oil here as in all Saudi Arabia. Williams had witnessed a huge oil discovery at Gull Island, 5 miles north of Prudhoe Bay in the Beaufort Sea, that could have produced so much oil that the official said that another pipeline could be built and in another year's time we can flood America with oil, Alaskan oil, and we won't have to worry about the Arabs. However, a few days after the find, the federal government ordered the documents and technical reports locked up, the well capped, and the rig withdrawn. Their excuse was that an oil spill in that part of the Arctic Ocean would kill various microorganisms. Williams felt that the U.S. government was deliberately creating an oil crisis, and delaying the flow of oil, in order to bankrupt the oil companies, which would lead to the nationalization of oil and gas. William Brown, director of technological studies at the Hudson Institute, said, "The President, Carter, said there is no chance of us becoming independent in our oil supplies. That is just wrong. We have at least 100 years of petroleum resources in this country." In 1976, proven resources were set at 37 billion barrels and the estimated recoverable resources were set at 150 billion barrels. This is about a 50-year supply at current usage levels. The American Petroleum Institute said in their 1977 annual report that recoverable crude was set at 30.9 billion barrels, and with today's technology, the amount of recoverable crude was 303.5 billion barrels, which is about an 80-year supply. The 1968 U.S. Geological Survey reported that the crude oil potential of the Atlantic Ocean continental shelf area is 224 billion barrels, The Gulf of Mexico has 575 billion barrels, the Pacific Coast has 275 billion barrels, and Alaska has 502 billion barrels, which is a grand total of 1,576 billion barrels. Only about 2% of these areas have been leased, which at the time of the report, had yielded 615 million barrels of oil, and 3.8 TCF, trillion cubic feet, of natural gas yearly. The Wall Street Journal said that we possessed 1,001 years of natural gas. Only about 2% of the outer continental shelf has been leased, even though it may contain over half of our potential natural gas reserves. Along the Atlantic coast, there is a potential of 67 TCF of gas, yet only about a dozen wells had been drilled in those areas. The Potential Gas Committee said in 1972, that we had 1,412 TCF in reserve. In 1973, Mobil said we had 758 TCF. Exxon said we had 661,380 TCF. The U.S. Geological Survey reported in 1974 that we had 761,1094 TCF in reserve. The National Academy of Sciences said in 1974 that we had 885 TCF, and there were other reports which indicated that we had over 700 TCF. These sources did not include the unconventional sources of coal beds, shale formations, tight sand formations, and deep underground water areas. From conventional sources, our known reserves were estimated to be about 237 TCF, and underground reserves were estimated to be about 530 TCF. An analysis of unconventional resources indicated the following yield: tight sand, 600 TCF, coal, 250 TCF, shale, 500 TCF, underground water zones in the Gulf, 200 TCF, and synthetic gas from peat, 1,443 TCF. This all adds up to a total of 3,800 TCF of natural gas, and with the US using an average of 21 TCF a year, that would be enough to provide us with another 100 years worth of energy. That doesn't take into account the synthetic gas obtainable from growing marine biomass, such as the California giant kelp, Macrocystis pyrifera, which grows 2 feet per day, and could be a renewable source for the production of synthetic gas. It is also estimated that the United States could have up to half of the world's known recoverable coal reserves, which could be about 200 billion tons, 45 billion of which is near the surface. At the time of this report, maximum production up to 1985 would have only used 10% of this reserve, even if no new reserves were discovered. In 1979, Herbert Foster, vice president of the National Coal Association, said, "America has 3 trillion tons of coal out there, ready to be mined. All we produced last year was 590 million tons. That's only 1 pound of coal for every 2.5 tons still in the ground." The U.S. Geological Survey has estimated our coal reserves will last us well into the next century. One reason coal development has been held up is that 40% of all reserves are on land owned by the federal government and environmental-minded citizens. The book The Next 200 Years by Herman Kahn and the Hudson Institute said, allowing for the growth of energy demand, we conclude that the proven reserves of these 5 major fossil fuels, oil, natural gas, coal, shale, and tar sands, alone could provide the world's total energy requirements for about 100 years, and only 1/5 of the estimated potential reserve sources could provide for more than 200 years of the projected energy needs. The Hudson Institute said in 1974, there is no shortage of energy fuels. Anthony Sutton wrote, the energy crisis is a phony, a rip-off, a political con game designed to perpetuate a crisis that can be managed for political power purposes. Conservative estimates indicate that we have 100 years of energy sources available, while evidence of other undeveloped finds show that we have adequate reserves that would last long beyond that. The Illuminati has a firm grip on the oil supply, and after their test in 1973, it's obvious that oil will be used as a weapon of control. One can only wonder what would happen to this country if a large-scale oil crisis occurred. Needless to say, it would be a disaster of unbelievable proportions that most likely would cause an economic collapse. Law and order would not exist in this scenario, as the population would fight among themselves for the limited resources that would be available, thus making the perfect situation for a world government to step